Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's live stream, Coding with Ryan. Notice I'm in a different facility today. My internet's acting weird at home, and apparently it's acting weird all over the city. So I'm in an office, have my son with me here. And so we're going to do the best that we can. Hopefully the internet holds out for the duration of this live stream so that you guys can learn a little bit today about Microsoft MakeCode. So that's what we're talking about today. Is Microsoft MakeCode. So it's similar to Scratch, like we've talked about in the past, but it's Microsoft's version of Scratch. So it's an equivalent, except that Microsoft develops it. There's some really great things about that. And so we're going to actually create a full game from start to end today in Microsoft MakeCode. And so we'll go ahead and get started with that right away. And I'll show you guys how to save these at the end so that if you create something new, you can share it with me, and then next week I will hopefully be able to showcase some of your work from Microsoft MakeCode in that. So what you need to do, open up your favorite browser, and you can search for Microsoft MakeCode. It's the easiest way to do that, and I'll go ahead and do that as well. Probably the first link that you see, and you should end up on this page. So Microsoft has developed this coding platform to be able to connect to a lot of different tools. So you can use MakeCode for working with microbits. So some small circuits that you can add some sensors to and different IoT, Internet of Things type devices to those. You can connect to the Lego EV3 Mindstorm. You can connect to Minecraft Education Edition, and you can actually create your own inside Minecraft Education Edition. You can use Microsoft MakeCode to send out spawn chickens or do things, but you can use loops and visual coding blocks just like you would any other tool, but they're going to show up in Minecraft for you. So that's a really interesting way to do that. But today we're going to use Arcade Edition for MakeCode. So go ahead and click on Arcade. And there are several tutorials already built, and that's kind of what we're going to follow today. We're going to follow one that teaches us how to make an arcade-style shooting game, but I will walk through that with you because I think it's important to understand what's going on while we're building this. So not just a how-to, but why are we doing the things that we're doing to make these things work in this game. So I want you to click on New Project and give your project a name. So I'm going to call mine Space Shooter. Didn't need an account for Microsoft MakeCode. It actually saves your project into the browser cache for now. So you can come back to the same browser later on and your project will be there. But at the end of the live stream today, I'll show you how to save that to your computer. So if you want to use it on another computer later on, you can do so as well. So click Create. And so one of the things you'll notice right away, a little bit different from Scratch, but our actual play area looks like an old 80s style Game Boy over on the left-hand side of the screen. And so it already has this joystick that you can control with your mouse.
You can use WASD instead.
And you can use WASD according to my son setting here, and that's absolutely right. You can also hit these A and B buttons. So it already has the controls built for you, and that's really what we're doing with the Arcade Edition of MakeCode is creating a game, an old arcade style game. And that's the functionality that it already supports to be able to handle that. So the first thing we're going to do is it uses the terminology similar to Scratch, as in sprites are the characters that we're going to use in the game. So from the sprites category, we're going to grab a set my sprite to sprite kind of player. I'm going to zoom in on this for you so that you can see my code a little bit better. So it says set my sprite to sprite, and it has this gray box and of kind player. So if you click on the drop down next to player, you notice that we have a projectile type, food type, enemy type. MakeCode already takes care of a lot of this for us, and it knows that if something's an enemy, then it shouldn't be hitting our player, or if something's a projectile that we want it to try to hit the enemy. So it handles some of that for us ahead of time, which makes it really nice for developing these types of games. But one of the really big differences in Scratch and MakeCode is that we're going to draw a lot of our characters with pixel art. So if you're interested in actually creating some characters for your game, MakeCode is a great tool to be able to do that. And the way that we're going to do that, we've set my sprite, click on this gray box, and it has come up with a large pixel screen. A few things about this editor screen: we can change the size of the pixel block that we're going to paint something with these small squares at the top. I'm going to use the smallest one. It gives us the most detail when we're creating something. We can flip and rotate. We can erase things, and we can choose colors from the paint over in the left-hand side. So I want you to choose a color for your spaceship, just a basic color to start out. And we're going to create our spaceship for this game. So I'm going to start in the middle of the screen, use my mouse button, drag it across, kind of make a line, make another line, make another line, and kind of create this almost spaceship looking thing. And I'm going to give you just a minute while I'm creating mine to go ahead and create your spaceship however you want it to look on the game. You can use other colors. So like I'm going to draw this like small cockpit looking area for my ship. Maybe add some embellishments here and there just to make it look interesting for the players that are going to play your game. And I might add some light blue at the bottom. All right, good question. So how do we get to paint a sprite? I'm going to go ahead and close mine real quick, and then we can come back to this. You just click on this small green square. Let me see if I can get even larger for you. The small gray square right here in the middle. Just click on it with your mouse, and it should open up to this screen where you start to be able to paint a sprite. Actually created one there. And if you've made one already, then it will show up here on the screen, the one that you've already made. All right, good question. Once you do it once, I'm sure you'll be able to do that again when we make some other things later on. But go ahead and work on creating your ship. And then click done. So how do we get to the coding tab? I know what you're talking about in Sprite or in Scratch, that it has a coding tab to come back to that. So what we'll want to do in MakeCode is when we click into to paint the sprite. So that's what you're thinking of if you're thinking of Scratch, that we're painting the sprite. Just click done down in the bottom right-hand corner. It's a green button. I'm not sure if it's showing up for you guys on my screen or not. Let's see if I can make it a little bit better. But there's a green done button down in the bottom right-hand corner, and click done. And that should take you back to the coding tab where we can add code to this.
And you'll see that the character is actually in the middle of the screen.
And our character showed up in the middle of the screen. That's what my son's talking about over in the side. So are we good there? Have you guys gotten the sprite painted and back on this coding tab? I don't want to move forward until everybody's at the same spot. So just let me know if you're having any more issues, and I'll give just a few minutes here before I move on to the next set of instructions. Come back to you. Okay, so hopefully you've gotten that. If you're still having issues, just comment again, and we might be able to figure out what's going on. Definitely want to make sure that we're all on the same page and learning from this as we go. So let me know if you are still having issues. Oh, I'm confused. All right, let's start back from the beginning then. I think it's okay to take just a step back to make sure that we're at the beginning. I want to make sure that just follow along with me here to make sure we're at the same spot, and I'll give you time to make sure we can create our characters as we go. But have we made it to this page? Were you at this page earlier on? Oh, the codes that I have. Gotcha. Good question. So the codes that I have, if you click on the sprites in the middle, it will open up with a list of other sprites, sprite blocks that you have. No, that's an... Is this what you're looking for or no? All right, I'm going to go back just to go through everything again, make sure that we're all on the same page. It's okay to take a step back if we need to. So on this main Microsoft MakeCode page, I want to make sure that I choose the arcade version. From here, click on New Project. If you've already got a project created like I have and I just saved, I'm going to click on it here, but this is where you click on New Project. And this is what should open up for you. We should see this screen open up. And then we want to drag this very top code block from the sprites section. So sprites, where it says create in the subheading, drag set my sprite in the Onstart on the inside the Onstart block for our game. Once we have set my sprite, then it should be a blank gray square here. We can click on that, and that lets us paint the character for my sprite. And then we can just leave this player the same at the very end. But once we click on my sprite, that gray block inside of it, we should be able to paint our spaceship that we want to have for our player. I'm going to add something to mine. And actually, I may add a quick pirate flag to the back just to make it a little bit cooler. Because there we go. And click done. Once you paint that and click done, your character will show up in the middle of your block here. Okay, the next thing we want to do is be able to move our character around. So we want to be able to move our character. We can go to the controller code blocks in the middle, and it says move my sprite with buttons. So I'm going to drag it out, put it underneath of set my sprite, and then click on the plus over on the right hand side of this code block. It says move my sprite with buttons, and this has VX and VY. So VX and VY are velocity, or how fast our character is moving. So I'm going to change this from 100 to 200. And the sprite thing is right in the middle of the screen right here. Where it says sprites. And then this very top code block says set my sprite to. That's the code block that we're going to use. I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit, and we can click this to close it again if we need to, right in the middle of the screen. And then that block that you just dragged over says set my sprite to sprite, and then you click in this block and it should come up with a pixel editor where you can actually draw the character that you want. All right, so once you've done that, you've created the character. Should look just like this. Zooming in way too much. Then we go to the controller tab and click the move my sprite with buttons. It already knows it's going to move it with this button over on the left-hand side of the screen. So you can use this little arcade Game Boy looking thing and make sure that your character moves around with the buttons. And you can change the speed again by pressing this plus button and changing the velocity in the X direction and the velocity in the Y direction. All right. We okay now? Is there anything that you need me to go back over again? So it's just, I know you'll get familiar with it over time, but it's just like Scratch, knowing where those code blocks live that we want to use. And so in this one, it's just named a little bit differently than it was in Scratch. But most of the stuff is very similar to what we've done prior in the Scratch programming environment. The numbers on the move my sprite, I have 200 and 200. And they, what are the numbers on the move my sprite? So those numbers correspond to how fast our player is going to move in the X direction and in the Y direction. So X and Y, and you guys don't have to worry about this a whole lot. This is math that you'll get onto later on in your schooling, but X direction means left and right, and Y direction means up and down. So how fast is our character going to be able to move in the X direction? This way, back and forth, left and right. And how fast is our character going to be able to move up and down? And you can actually make it a lot faster. We want to find that balance between moving too fast and then actually being able to control our character in the game. If we move too fast, we're not going to be able to control our character and wouldn't be fun for the person playing the game. If we move too slow, we won't be able to dodge some of the aliens that are going to start coming onto our game a little bit later on. So we want to find that balance, and you can change that to whatever works well for you. But 100 was the default. So if you're at 100, say I put 100 in the X direction and 200 in the Y direction. See, I'm moving much slower left and right than I am up and down. So that just shows you that one is the left and right, one is up and down. I don't want to have them both the same for right now because our spaceship should be able to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and make sure that our sprite stays onto the game screen. You notice mine can go off the game screen, and I don't know where that character is or what's going on while that's happening. So there's a block. I'll find it for you. It's in the sprites code blocks. It is down in the overlaps section. I'm going to see if I can scroll out a little bit so that you can see it. So we opened up the sprite code blocks, create, then there's some physics, then there's effects, and then down in the middle of effects is something that says set my sprite to stay in the screen, and we can turn this off or on, but I'm going to drag that code block underneath of my code blocks that I already have out here. So this is where some of the cool things with MakeCode come into play. Like, it already knows how to build an arcade game, and it knows that you probably want your character to stay on here. And just like you were talking to me last week about if on edge bounce, doesn't really do that, but it just stops you from going off the screen with this code block. So very similar to what we were doing last week. And now your character should not be able to leave the screen just by adding that one code block for our sprite.
And if you didn't have that and the aliens were still coming, you could easily just get hit by one of the aliens and lose lives because you don't know where they are.
That is true. If we're off the screen and the aliens are coming off the screen, they could be hitting us and we wouldn't even know about that. Okay, so let's go into some of the other interesting things that make MakeCode already great for us to create these kind of games. I think it's in the game code blocks.
Game update.
No. This is one I'm going to have to look for. Haven't used this quite as much as Scratch, so I'm going to find the code block myself. Info. So the info code blocks give us information about our character and about the entire game. So I'm going to set my life to 3. It will automatically give me 3 lives while I'm getting hit from my character, and you should see these little hearts show up for you in the top part of your screen. Alrighty, so it's taken care of, and it knows if you get hit by an enemy, it's going to make you lose a life. So all of that is already handled inside of this environment. If you want to add more life to your character, that's fine. My son added 5 hit points or 5 hearts to his character. And again, that's in the info section of the code. Okay, so all of that has been setting up our game when the program starts. That's what this Onstart does. That's the event that we kicked off. So think of it as the when blocks in Scratch. When something happens, we're going to have some code to happen, or this is kind of that when flag is clicked from Scratch, this Onstart block. We're going to add some more events based on pressing buttons on the game. So we're going to go to controller and then drag on this on a button pressed and drag it somewhere else out in your workspace. So on, same as when we did that from Scratch. And what do we think we want to happen when the A button is pressed?
Summon an alien.
I don't think we're going to summon an alien. We're actually going to start shooting lasers from our spaceship. So we're not summoning aliens. That's going to start happening automatically anyway. We're going to use this A button to actually fire some projectiles across the screen.
Can't you use any key on the thing just shoots a laser?
Yes. So yes, exactly. We are going to shoot something. We're going to shoot our lasers across the screen. Daniel's right. You could change this to any of the other buttons if you want to do that as well. If you want to have any button pressed, it lets you
use any button.
You can maybe use the space bar key or something if you want to fire your projectile. But I'm going to leave it the A button for now. On A button pressed. Go to sprites and drag one of these set my sprites into the on A is pressed, because the laser is going to be a sprite itself. So whatever we're shooting from our ship, that projectile is going to be a laser as well. So I want that inside this A button pressed.
then you're gonna have to draw your own, right?
Yeah, you can draw your own. And I'm going to go ahead and backpedal on that just a little bit. And here's why. So it is a sprite, but they've already got it set up for us. And again, I'm fairly new to MakeCode. That's why we're kind of learning this together as we go. Drag this block and get rid of it. Go to sprites, and if you scroll down past create, past physics, past effects, there's projectiles already taken care of for us. So I'm going to grab this set projectile and put it inside the on A button pressed. So this code block says set a projectile, create a projectile to projectile, and it has this gray block again that we used up earlier for our sprite from my sprite, which is this guy up here, our spaceship, with a velocity in the X direction of 50 and a velocity in the Y direction of 50. Now for this particular game, we don't want our projectile to shoot in the Y direction at all. We just want it to launch across the screen to the left and to the right. So that's going to be our X value only. So I'm going to change velocity of Y to 0. And I'm going to change velocity of X to 200. Really fast, left and right, nothing up and down. And click on this gray box and create a space laser. So paint a laser, and it can just be a line like this, a red line. You can have some effects around it if you want. If you've got a really interesting space laser, click done. Once you've painted that, the block's already made, everything else is already handled, just hit the A button and there goes your projectile across the screen.
Yeah, projectile size.
My son's making it huge, so it's going to be a super tall laser, and it looks like a square shooting across the screen. I think he wants to be able to make sure that he doesn't get caught by the aliens as he goes.
There we go.
So here's my code block. I want to make sure that you can see it. On the A button pressed, set a projectile to, this was already filled in, projectile with a square. You can paint that from my sprite. So it's coming out of my sprite with velocity in the X direction of 200, velocity in the Y direction of 0. Here's what would happen if I have, maybe I have something in the Y direction. Watch what happens with my laser.
It just goes like down. It's super hard to hit the aliens that way, dude. But I changed the speed of it to like 1,000.
You can change the speed as well. But here's why, because we're telling it to go in the X direction and in the Y direction. And if we put it at 0, that means it won't go in that Y direction at all, and it will shoot across the screen just the way that we want it to.
Wait, did you actually make that?
Yes, I made that projectile.
Oh.
Looks cool, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This projectile is absolutely amazing, I guess.
Okay, so now that we have our projectile firing, let's start bringing some aliens into our screen. Click in the game blocks, the game code blocks, and I want the on game update every 500 milliseconds. So this is saying every 500 milliseconds, I want something to happen on my game. And in this case, I want enemies to start coming across the screen at me while I am trying to shoot at them.
Kind of like they're spawning in like random positions.
Kind of like spawning, and we're going to make them show up and come across the screen at us. Now grab a sprite and set. We do actually want this top one. And instead of player at the end, I want you to change that to enemy. Make sure that it's changed to enemy, because MakeCode takes care of a lot of stuff if it already knows that what we're creating now is an enemy. And draw an enemy inside of this gray block. I'm going to use a green, kind of make this alien octopus looking thing coming across the screen. You can go ahead and make your own character for that as well. Do I want some creepy eyes? All right, let's see what that. It's not going to look like anything yet. Oh, it's going to show up in the middle of my screen. So it shows up once in the middle of my screen, and it looks like it's gobbling up my ship. That's okay. Nothing's happening with it yet. We just created it and actually drew it for the time being.
Oh, that's tiny.
All right, make sure, let me know if you haven't got your ship drawn. Everyone needs to have an enemy alien, or maybe you want create another spaceship. You can do so. Maybe create a Star Wars themed version of this game and have some TIE fighters coming in. You can go ahead and do that as well. All right, the next thing we're going to do is make our enemy move. So we do that in the sprites and in the physics where it says set. Sorry, I've got another kid in here too, and he's singing in the background. So set my sprite velocity, put it underneath of your enemy sprite. But I want you to change where it says my sprite to my sprite 2, because this is the one that we just created. So we're creating an enemy, and it actually should start moving on you. Okay, that's fine. You can create your character. We'll set a little bit of time here talking about the directions that we want our enemies to go. We want our enemy to not move up and down in the Y direction. So if we change that to 0, and what do you think we would have to do in order to make it move to the left across the screen? Right now you see that it's moving to the right across the screen the entire time. What value do you think we would have to put in the X direction in order to make our enemies come from the right to the left across the screen? All right. Anyone have any ideas? Daniel said it, but I'm trying to give you guys a chance to check that out as well, because he's sitting here looking over my shoulder. Minus 100. Yes, we want to use a minus value. Okay, so a minus was telling our character to move to the left. Actually, my camera, I think, is reversed. It would go that way instead of the other. So I'm going to put a negative number inside of here, and we'll do negative 100. Right now, they're moving from the middle of the screen. That's okay. We'll fix that in just a moment, but we're just making sure the direction is working first. All right, before we move on to the next step, which is to make it like randomly show up on the right-hand side, the Y values. Any other questions? Everyone good, or need a little bit more time to draw your alien? May erase a little bit of mine. He's looking a little square on the back side here.
Mine is a rectangle.
Okay. So let's move it on. We're going to go into the sprites again. And inside of physics, underneath the velocity that we just brought in, we're going to do a set my sprite position. and make sure to change it to set my sprite 2. Good question. How do you get it so that it doesn't go diagonal? So if your enemy's going diagonal, that means you've got something in the Y direction here, and it should be 0. So your VY should be 0 in this case, instead of whatever number you have. Just like with the projectile, when we have a Y, it's going to go up and down some, and we don't want it to do that at all. We just want it to go this left and right pattern across the screen. So that's where just having an VX value will take care of that for you.
0. Where are they?
Okay, now we're going to pick a random value to make our character show up at a random position across the screen. I want to make sure that the X value doesn't really matter to us a whole lot as far as where it's going to appear, but this Y value, we definitely want it to be random across the screen. So in the math, just like we had random in Scratch, there's a random in the math blocks inside of MakeCode as well. It's down at the bottom. It says pick random 0 to 10 and drag it over and put it inside of the Y value for this second one. Make sure it's on the position one. Pick a random between 0 to 10. And unlike Scratch, it does have this little red dot that shows up that shows you that something can fit in there. So it's kind of helpful to know that you've made that work. And we want to change the numbers from 5 to 115. And that's just based on the size of the screen in Microsoft MakeCode. That's what they already have for us. And you notice it's over here on the right now. It's over here on the left, all the way on the left side of the screen. I want you to change the X to 160. And once you do both of that, you should see aliens start to come your way across the screen. I'm going to leave my code block up here just a minute so that you can see. I know we added several numbers there. I want to make sure that you see mine and that you can add those to yours as well. So that's what we're looking for, this kind of effect where the space aliens are coming from the right to the left across the screen. Make sure the X position is 160. Make sure my sprite 2 is selected. And make sure that your random values are from 5 to 115. So we've got a lot of aliens coming across the screen. We are going to add some effects for our enemy to make sure that if they hit a projectile, they get destroyed. So that's in the sprites. Sprites block. My son has added a
100 milliseconds instead.
He reduced the time on the screen so that
You can reduce it even more.
So that they're appearing more frequently. So let's go ahead and make sure that this guy gets destroyed if it gets hit by a projectile. It's over in sprites.
Oof, I got rid of it.
Down in effects, the very last code block in effects section of Sprite, it says set my sprite auto destroy. And make sure it's changed from my sprite to my sprite 2 for the enemy, and turn auto destroy to on. Now we should be able to actually fire
And destroy them.
and destroy them. Mine's not getting destroyed. What's going on with mine? Maybe it's not disappearing. Maybe they are getting destroyed yet. I know there are some more steps to make sure that we have some cool effects once it disappears. So we'll move on to that next. Yeah, if you need to pause or go back a little bit, you can do that to check out the code. The code block that I used was sprites, and it's down in effects, the very bottom one that says set my sprite auto destroy. And then you just drag it in and put it underneath of what we've been doing for the enemy.
Then, would you use for like to spawn them like 5 to 100?
It's in the math and random.
Oh.
And all the other code blocks in the purple. Yeah, those are all, again, in the sprites. I think every one of these we got from the sprites code block section. If you're asking about where these code blocks are, you can pause it, and this video will be available later too if you need to go back and look at it again. I had to as well a few times when I started out with this, and that's natural when we get into a new programming environment, trying to figure out where everything is. But a lot of what everything that I just did for the enemy, all of those are in the sprites section. And there is a search feature at the top if you're looking for something in particular. If we're looking for the position, I believe we could find it by typing in position at the top, and see it has this set my sprite position to something. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on just in case, just so we can get this finished today. And again, if you need to go back later and check this out, this tutorial in particular is on Microsoft MakeCode's main page with all of those inside the arcade section. So you should be able to follow along as well as we go. So I want something to happen when my objects overlap. So when the enemy either runs into my character or my projectile runs into the enemy, I want something to happen. And when we did that in Scratch, we did this touching question mark block. If something is touching something else, then run the code block to do something. MakeCode handles a lot of that for us. It's in sprites, I believe, down in overlaps. So click on the sprites code blocks, scroll down past create, past physics, past effects, past projectiles, and then finally overlaps. All right, so I'm going to actually drag 2 of these over here because, again, we've got 2 different types of overlaps that we want to check for. Projectile overlapping an enemy or enemy overlapping our main player. So I'm going to drag a couple of these out here so that we can handle those. Make some room for them on my screen. And I'm going to drag another one over there. So you may need to make room, move some things around. You can zoom out if you need to, if it's easier for you, but I'm not going to on my screen.
What's happening with that one? Why does it look different?
And the second one's going to look different initially because they match, and it doesn't like that you've created 2 things that do the exact same thing on the screen. So the second one for right now is sort of this like checkered color on the screen and doesn't let us do anything with it right now. We want 2 of these on sprite of kind. We're going to change this top one to on sprite of kind projectile overlaps other sprite of kind enemy.
Enemy destroy. And then as soon as we change it, it should let the other one be used.
All right, yeah, as soon as we change this top one, this one showed up in blue, and so that we can actually use that. So we're going to use this top one now. On sprite of kind projectile overlaps other sprite of kind enemy. We're going to bring in a destroy sprite block, and that's in the sprites at the top. So there is a destroy, and I believe
destroy sprite 2.
So it says destroy my sprite, but we're going to do a few things with this. We're going to drag where at the very top of this block, it says on sprite of kind projectile overlaps other sprite. I'm going to drag other sprite into this destroy block and get rid of my sprite. I want it to destroy whatever sprite, whichever enemy is overlapping with the projectile. If we didn't do that, it would destroy some random enemy on the screen that may not be overlapping with my projectile. And then you can change the effect that you want to happen when it's destroyed. So a good one is fire. A good one is fire. And so now if you're overlapping, you should see these trails of fire show up on your enemy when you've destroyed them. All right, so make sure to drag other sprite into where it says my sprite 2. It's really important that this is dragged into here. Yeah, and get rid of where it says my sprite 2. All right, and once we destroy an enemy, the other sprite, okay, I don't see the other sprite tab on the destroy block. Right, it's going to be on this on. You have to take and drag with your mouse this where it says other sprite and drag it inside of the destroy block. It's not going to be there. You can't select it like you did with the other ones. Like you did, it's not a drop-down list like we have with other things. You have to actually drag it in there. Good question, though. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is actually score a point when we've destroyed an enemy. I believe that's in info as well. Change score by 1 and drag it in underneath of where we destroyed our sprite. It's keeping up with their score in the top right-hand corner of the screen now. Make sure you do the change score by 1 and not set score to 0. Otherwise, it'll just keep setting it back to 0 every time instead of changing it by 1. All right, we're almost there. We've almost got this finished up. So what happens if the enemy hits us? So we're going to change this other on sprite. And we're going to change the other sprite of kind enemy. So on sprite of kind player overlaps another sprite or other sprite of kind enemy. So if any of the enemies actually like bump into our character, we want something bad to happen. We are going to drag a destroy my sprite, and this is in the sprite blocks. It's under effects, destroy my sprite. and replace other sprite. So we want to destroy the enemy. The enemy is going to get destroyed. They've kind of crashed into us. So they're destroyed too, but we're going to end up losing life along the way. We want our character to actually lose some health points. We're going to do a camera shake. So this is kind of a cool effect that's already built in that lets us make it look like our screen's vibrating a little bit and moving around. And that's in the scene blocks. Scene. You hear my son throwing Legos across the floor. Scene. Down at the bottom of scene is camera. And there's one that says camera shake. And I'm going to drag it under the destroy. And then info, change life by -1. Drag it underneath of there. So every time I get hit by an enemy, my camera's going to shake a little bit. You see my character kind of moving around. Oh, and they're losing life along the way. But once they get hit, you see I'm losing a life. Everything shakes it just a little bit. And then it automatically keeps track. It knows when your life is 0, your game is over, and it gives you a score along the way. All right, so that's it for the basic arcade shooter game in Microsoft MakeCode. Let me know if you have any questions while I'm talking about this and wrapping this up. But just know that we're using a lot of the same types of code blocks that we used in Scratch. They're just called something different. And so that's one of the great things about coding is that as you progress, the languages, the syntax, how things are described in the coding language are going to be different. All right. And so it's important to understand the principles behind some of these things, why we want to use them before we start using them, because that way later on we can just look up the syntax. We can just look up, hey, how do we get a sprite that's an enemy on Microsoft MakeCode? And we can find that. And that's really easy for us to like search on the internet and find quickly. But to know that we need to create a sprite to begin with, that's something that's important. To know that we need to bring out these on blocks that are like events onto the screen. Knowing that's important, because you can find how to do this on any other language that you work with, but knowing those basic principles behind it makes it really valuable. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. If you I want to show you real quickly how to download and save this game. All you have to do is click the download tab at the bottom underneath of the gamepad. And actually there are a lot of different arcade type tools that you can use. And actually at the end of this month, we're going to give away, we've got an extra BrainPad arcade. And so we're going to try to do a live drawing for those of you in the live stream to be able to win one of these small BrainPad arcades that saves your game directly from Microsoft MakeCode and lets you play that in your hands right away. You can do that. Or if we want to, we just want to be able to save this to our computer so that we can open up later on. It actually is really cool. It saves as a PNG file, so an image file, and then you can save it later on. So down at the bottom where it says Space Shooter, you can click Save. And I don't know if you could tell on my screen, I'll go to full screen. It's saved. Your project is saved in this image. Import or drag it in the editor, reload it. So it saved this file down into the bottom of my screen. It says Arcade Space Shooter. If I open it up in Windows, it just looks like this. It just looks like a normal image. But all I have to do is come back into the MakeCode arcade later on. And I can, let's see if I can pull that up. I can grab that image that it just downloaded, drag it over onto the screen, and it will load my project just as I had before. You may need to watch that again. and that's okay if you need to in order to save it. But suffice to say, it saves it as an image that you can then load up later on another computer or load up into another browser later on when you do that. Hopefully this is helpful. I think there are a lot of interesting things with MakeCode. I'm excited to learn more about it as well as we go through this. So thanks for joining in today. Again, next Thursday at 3, we'll be back here again. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to comment on these videos as they get loaded up into YouTube later on. And have fun coding and learning about Microsoft MakeCode. Thanks, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.